depending on the performance that year. So there is diploma in aeronautical engineering, certificate in aeronautical engineering, and bachelor's in aeronautical engineering. The requirements differ. For instance, for the certificate, you need a minimum of C to do the course. For the diploma, you need a minimum of B. And for the degree, you need a minimum of A. You also need to perform well in maths, physics, geography. Yeah, maths, physics, and geography. You can get admitted with history or CRE, but it's very rare. For instance, in my class, we were 46 and only 2 did not do geography. So for those who go for history and CRE, they might still get admitted, but it's harder for them because of things like navigation of aircraft. You need knowledge in geography. So those are the minimum requirements. You need to do well in maths, in physics, in geography. And if you want the degree, you need an A. If you want the diploma, you need at least a B. If you want the certificate, you need at least a C.
Okay, thank you very much, Brian. I think we started from the top. Maybe you can tell us who is an aeronautical engineer. I'm sure many may not know.
Okay. An aeronautical engineer is a male or a female who is responsible for designing planes, operating them, and maintaining them. So when I talk about a plane, I mean anything that flies. It could be an aircraft, though most people call an aircraft a plane, but an aircraft is one type of a plane. There are missiles, there are rockets, there are drones. So anything that flies, which is called a plane, even the air balloons and the weather balloons, they're also planes. So an aeronautical engineer is responsible for designing them, manufacturing them, operating them, and maintenance work on the planes.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we can also hear from Faith now. So Faith, you can do a little more introduction about yourself, where you went to high school. You can tell us the grade you scored, and you tell us a little about who is an architectural engineer and what does it take to get admission to be an architectural engineer. The most difficult word for me. Over to you, Faith.
And I'm a graduate architect. So I went to a school called MAAI Girls. It's somewhere in Othaya in Nyeri County. And yeah, I had an A, but that is a while back. And things have changed, I believe now. Things might be a bit tougher, but I know we have the capability. So an architect, the duty of an architect, the role of an architect is basically design of structures in the built environment. This means things like buildings, roads, stadiums, anything that is built in the environment. The architect is the lead designer. So other things that the architect does is like project management, consultancy. Yeah, those are the main things an architect does. And we work with multiple engineers, like, the civil engineers, the electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, and interior designers, landscape architects, and also people we call quantity surveyors. So that's the entire design team. So the requirement for doing architecture is a 2-part degree. So the first part, 4 years and then the second part is 2 years. So the whole degree is 6 years in total. So when you do the first part, the first 4 years, it is equivalent to a diploma level. That means you can work as a technician, you can help the main architect to design, and you can do draftsmanship. That means you're the one who is doing the paperwork in the design team. When you do the second part, the next 2 years, you then go on to do 2 years of professional work. Then you do an exam, another exam. At this point, it's like 8 years after high school. Then you get to be registered as an architect. Now, as a registered architect, you can have your own designs, and you can put your label or your stamp, obviously authorize designs individually. At that stage, people usually do construction firms or such kind of things, like you make your own company, basically. So yeah, that is the degree course. It is in 2 parts, 4 years and 2 years. Then we have the diploma. It usually takes 6 semesters. That is roughly 3 years. Yeah, and the certificate is roughly 1 year. Again, when you do the diploma and certificate, you're going to do the draftsmanship. That is the paperwork part of design. So the requirements for the main architecture degree, you'll find that they'll say it's C+ overall grade, and especially in mathematics, there are 3 groups that they check. The first group, or basically the first thing, is mathematics. So you have to have a minimum grade of C+ in maths. And the second category is the sciences, physics, biochem. So one of them, you should have the minimum grade. And then there's the languages, because you see, design is something you do, you relate a lot with people. So you need to be good in the languages and also in terms of documentation. So that is English or Kiswahili. Those are the requirements for that. And they're the same for the diploma and the certificate. But the higher you score, the better, because they're highly competitive. So A-, that will be the best thing to happen if you want to go into architecture or the other things I mentioned, the engineering, quantity survey, real estate, interior design. Yeah, so those are the requirements. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Faith. I think you have said something very nice to hear, that you scored a straight A. So scoring an A is not a preserve for boys. I'm sure the girls that are looking at you today can also dream of getting an A, and they can see that it is possible. They've also told us about architecture, and I'm sure they now have an idea. So, Brian, what is your experience in the field of aeronautical engineering? What's your experience working as an aeronautical engineer? By the way, do you have anybody here who wants to be an aeronautical engineer? Yes. Okay, fine. We have. Yes, Brian. I hope you heard my question.
Okay. What is my experience working in aeronautical engineering? I can sum it up in different ways. The first experience is exposure and traveling. When you are an aeronautical engineer, you travel a lot, especially if you are an accompanying engineer. An accompanying engineer is the engineer that accompanies the aircraft during flight. So if you're flying from, let's say, Wilson Airport to Malindi Airport, you fly with an engineer on board. In case the aircraft develops anything, the engineer can sort it out. So that's an accompanying engineer. So as an accompanying engineer, you travel a lot. If wherever the aircraft is going, you go with the aircraft. So you will have that experience of traveling a lot. The other experience is in terms of exposure, because you work with different companies and you work with different passengers. So the first company I worked with, I won't mention the name, but the first company I worked with was the only company that is chartered to do flights over Somalia, because Somalia is basically a war zone. So today you would interact with the president of Somalia, the next day you would interact with the Al-Shabaab leader, something like that. The next day you'd be in Mogadishu and there are bombs all over. So there's that aspect to it in terms of exposure and traveling. You're exposed to different lifestyles and to different people. The other aspect is in terms of experience is challenging you to think on your feet. Sometimes you're in a flight and there's a problem. The pilot, the flight attendants, the passengers, they all turn to the engineer to solve the problem. So there is that experience of thinking on your feet. The other experience has been with what do I call it? The other experience has been with basically knowing a lot of stuff, because sometimes, let's say the military want you to install missiles on the aircraft. So maybe you've never held a weapon before and now you have to install them on the aircraft. So it will make you know a lot of things that otherwise you would not know. Yeah, so I would say that is the experience. One, there is a lot of traveling. You get a lot of exposure, meeting different classes of people. Then on the other hand, you have to think on your feet. You have to be quick, you have to be knowledgeable, you have to read a lot. If, let's say, 3 years ago, there were several incidences of the Boeing 737 MAX crashing after takeoff. So as an engineer, you have to read all the new material coming up on that, so you understand why the aircraft is doing that, and so you can prevent your aircraft from doing that. Recently, there is a Precision Airline. They had an accident over Lake Victoria. So as an engineer, you have to read the new material coming up about that. Sometimes you get to be part of an investigation when there's been an accident. You're called to investigate what could have caused the accident. So you have to read a lot and think. Yeah. So I'd say that is my experience. I don't know if that makes sense.
Does it make sense? Okay, thank you very much, Brian. Faith, what has been your experience like working in the field of architecture?
Okay, thank you. So architecture is a really interesting field because you get to experience both sides, like the engineering and technical stuff, and then you still get to relate with people. So for me, the first thing is that you get to learn a lot, because in architecture, you're expected to design things for everyone. So you have to know how to design a school. You have to understand, how students work, how teachers work. And if you have to design a hospital, you have to understand how all that works, like the machines, the exam rooms, the theater. If you have to design, let's go maybe like what Brian is doing. If you have to design like an airport or hangars, you have to know how that works. So you get to learn a lot in terms of technical things. And on the other side, you get to learn a lot in terms of people, because you have to relate with clients. If my client is maybe the board of a school, I have to know how to relate with them. I have to learn how to relate with people, learn their characters and stuff like that. And it is also really exciting to work with people. Like, you get to talk to someone and you understand what their dream is for maybe their home, maybe their place of work, some offices they want to set up, or a mall. And you get to be the one to bring these things from the dream to a reality. So it's quite interesting, and you get to learn again both sides, the technical bit and the people bit. And I think the people bit is the most exciting one because there's a lot of characters and different ideas and perspectives that can impact your own life and you can learn from them. Yeah, so that is the experience working in architecture. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Faith, for that experience. So before we go to the last question that I wanted to ask, where I request that you give general advice, I want us to get a few questions from the students. So you will introduce yourself and ask your question. So you ask your question either to Brian, so you say your question is directed to either Brian or...
My name is Celestine Dano from Common College. My question is this one. Who inspired you or what inspired you to get into this kind of career? So I would like to know what inspired you. This goes to both of you. To start with Brian.
Okay, what inspired me or who inspired me? I think you've noticed by now the way we are speaking, engineers are not people persons. So I don't think I was inspired by a person. I don't interact a lot with people or look up to people. What inspired me is, you know how when you're kids and you look at an aircraft pass by and people like to talk, maybe mtu atasema, hiyo ndege venye unaiona sahi, hiyo ndege sahi iko Somalia. And you're like, no way, hiyo ndege iko Somalia na tunaiona hapa sahi. Or when a jet engine passes by and it leaves behind a cloud of white smoke. And then, I don't know what you people said when you were kids, but sisi tukiwa watoto, tulikuwa tunasema eti wana spray clouds ndio kukue na mvua. And you think about it and you're like, that can't be true because tunafunzwa kwa Biblia kwamba Mungu ndiye aliumba and ni Mungu ndiye anatupea mvua. And then you learn in geography about evaporation and condensation. So you're like, hakuna ndege hapa. So just hearing what people say about aircraft and seeing how people are fascinated by aircraft. By the way, I'm saying aircraft because hakuna plural ya aircraft. It's aircraft in singular and aircraft in plural. So the way people are fascinated by aircraft, it does not matter if it's your dad or your elder brother or yourself. Like ndege ikipita juu kila mtu anaangalia. So I was fascinated by those things and I wanted to learn more about this thing that fascinates everyone, but not many people seem to know a lot about them. I remember when I was in, it must have been class 2 or class 3, and Raila came around with a chopper and everyone ran to go and see the chopper. People would leave their businesses, wakimbie tu waende waone ndege. So the way people were fascinated by aircraft, it made me want to know more about them, especially because the explanations people would give when you ask them hazikuwa zina make sense. So I wanted to learn more about it.
Okay. Okay, for me, it was really simple. When I was in primary in high school, I used to draw a lot. I know probably here nyinyi. So I used to draw, like, you know, you're drawing people or small houses and things like that. Then as I was getting to Form 4, I realized I'm really passionate about vitu hesabu, but still I really wanted to have art in my livelihood. So the only thing that combines art and engineering or mathematics ni architecture. Like, you can do the course or do it in life while still, you know, you're still satisfying yourself in terms of your two passions. So that was interesting for me. And as I continued studying, like especially when I started, I realized it's a male dominated field. So it was a challenging thing and a good thing for me to do it and excel in it. Because I mean, who wouldn't want to excel in a male dominated field? And to show others, it's not that difficult. It's not that hard to get something that you want to do. So the basic reason I got into it is it combines the things I like, and it was a challenging thing. So it can be like a torchbearer. Yeah, I hope that makes sense.
Okay. The last question. What is the secret, or what made you to get this A? Because many of us would like to get this A that you got, and many people who got it, they don't have careers, and so what is the secret? Yes.
Okay, thank you. Before you answer that question, we can leave it to the general advice part. Okay. I think it's okay. We can leave it now.
Okay.
Advice. So we have another question from. So you'll remember that question. What is the secret to getting that A? Brian and Faith.
Yes.
I can't get her.
Okay. For instance, I want to become a pilot, and I don't do well in physics. That's my career. Or maybe I don't do well in geography. And there is something else which I can become, which still is related to that, and it's not related to any other subject. So what can you tell me to do? Like, if I want to become an aeronautical engineer and I'm not doing well in physics, what else can I become which is related still to the aeroplane thing? Yeah. Yeah, that's my question.
Okay, before I answer your question, I have a question for you. What do you do well in?
I do well in biology and also physics and geography.
Okay, great. I asked that question so that I can use it to answer you. My answer for you is in two parts. The first part, what you need to do is to change your mentality, because we are speaking to Form 1 Scarlett, isn't it? Yeah, so Form 1 is too early to resign to the fact that I don't do well in maths, or I don't do well in physics, or I don't do well in this subject. So the first thing to do would be to change your attitude. And the reason I asked what you do well in is to convince you that if you do well in that, you can do well in physics or in maths, because all these subjects, they're just similar. Since you joined Form 1, whichever subject you take, if you take physics, mulianza na introduction to physics, what is physics, and then you went to the principles of physics, like forces, pressure. And if you go to biology, it's the same thing. Mulianza na introduction to biology, what is biology, and then you went to the principles of biology, where you learn about the cell and what's inside a cell. If you go to chemistry, you go to history, you go to geography, you did the same things. You learn what is this, what are the principles, and then as you get to Form 2, you'll start to apply those principles now. So if you can do that for biology, you can do the same things for physics. So I think Form 1 is too early to resign to the fact that you don't do well in one subject. And if you change your attitude, you can do well in physics. The other part of answering your question, what can you do? You, instead of engineering, you can opt to be a pilot. Instead of a pilot, you can opt to be a flight dispatcher. A flight dispatcher is the person who does the flight plans, analyzes the weather, advises the pilot, maybe fly at this altitude or fly at this other altitude. You can do ATC. ATC is air traffic control. They're the people who work in the tower. They advise aircraft on the runway to take, the taxiway to take, the flight path to take, the weather. They would tell you the weather in Nairobi is bad, so go and land in Mombasa, something like that. You can go into finances and work basically in the aviation industry, but from the finance perspective. So maybe you're the one who analyzes what is the best fare to set, what is the best salary scale to give engineers to attract them, things like that. You can go into hospitality management. So you work in aviation, but under the hospitality management. Maybe you decide the best meals to serve on the aircraft. You decide the best way to prepare a meal inside the aircraft, things like that. You can go into crew resource management. You become a cabin crew, flight attendant. So there are different things you can do if you don't want to go into engineering.
And my last question is, how many years does it take for one to do piloting course?
Okay. A piloting course does not depend on the years. It depends on flight hours. For you to be a licensed pilot, for instance, the CPL, that is a commercial pilot license, you need at least 200 flight hours during training. So the classes where you sit in class and you are taught takes about 6 months. The 200 hours can take 6 months, can take 1 year, can take 2 years, because what they do, they charge you per flight hour. So let's say you have gone to a school that charges maybe 50,000 for 1 flight hour. So ukipata 50,000 unakuja unalipa, you go for 1 hour, then you do that until you get 200 flight hours. So it usually depends on how much time you can take to raise the necessary amount, and it is not confined to a specific time.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have another question here.
My name is Medlin from one college. I want to ask, like for me, I want to become an engineer in dealing with the ground, like developing the semi-arid places. So I was asking if you can give me details about that engineering.
Okay, I think I'll take that one. So what you're referring to ni kitu inaitwa geotechnical engineer. So for that, you still need the same things, the maths, the physics, na sana geography, and the requirements are the same. Like itaandikwa ni C+, lakini the higher you score, the better. And that one is a very competitive one, because not many universities offer it within the country. So you need to perform really well, especially in the 3 categories: maths, physics, and geography. I don't know if that is enough information. Okay. Welcome.
We have another question here. Yeah. Someone is coming. Yeah.
So my name is Abigail Msuna, and I'm from Scarlet. And my question does not specify. So it's I want to be a doctor. So I was asking Brian, you said you go to Somalia, then there's some bombs. Don't know, there's those things that are terrifying. So I was asking, if I'm a neurosurgeon, do
do I participate in such things? Like, do we go for flights? You say you go for flights from this place, you go with the airplane. Now, nowadays, like you're just like you're like managing that thing. So the question, as a doctor, do I take part? Do I take part in both architecture and I don't, yes. Yes, do I take part because maybe you had an injury when operating? Do I take part in those things, those air?
Okay. It depends on where you specialize, because if you look at how doctors work, they are surgeons, they are those who offer pediatric care, they are psychiatrists, they are flying doctors. So if you are a flying doctor, you'll have to do that, because the essence of a flying doctor is to fly into areas and offer emergency health services. So if I am in Somalia and a grenade gets me, I'm hoping a doctor will come and help me out. Or in the army, in the Air Force, in the KDF, they also recruit doctors who take care of them. So if you go into that line, then you will have to fly into those areas and you will have to work with people working in those areas. But you don't have to specialize in that. You can, if you're not comfortable with that environment, you can stick to the hospital. Yeah, but if you want to be a doctor, I would advise you to start getting used to blood, because yeah, as a doctor you cannot escape that. I remember in first year, some of my friends who went into medicine, some of them quit despite getting the A's and getting the course. They could not manage blood and dead people. As a doctor, when you go to do medicine, the first 3 months you work a lot with the dead people and victims of accidents. So if you want to get into medicine, you can start getting used to that, and you can start one way of doing it for both engineers and doctors is to look at the science. So as a doctor, you look at a human being as a scientific entity.